Hi, everybody, and welcome to Beebe Book Buzz. This is your holiday edition, although really it's not because a lot of the things we're doing are nothing to do with the holidays. But we are happy to have you here, and we have, as usual, some interesting things to tell you about this month, about what we've been reading recently, in hopes that you can find your next great read. And I'm going to start off today with something that is, boy, it's kind of for everybody. I mean, if you're a mystery lover or a scavenger hunt hunter, if you're a fan of things gothic, mysterious, and ghostly, and I'm talking about like everything from Edgar Allan Poe to Vincent Price to the Weston game. If you're a millennial with a thing for Indiana Jones, Goonies, Madonna, or just music in general, I mean, there's a whole lot of things to recommend this. I must have left people out. If you love books set in Boston by an author who actually knows it well, if you are someone who reads for character as well as intricately woven plots, or really if you just want a light, entertaining read that will engross you and whisk you away, then you might want to try Tuesday Mooney Talks to Ghosts by Kate Rakulia. Um, don't be put off by the title, which a lot of people assume must make it a book for kids or young adults. It's not. In fact, the title of the British version was changed for just that reason to Tuesday Mooney Wore Black, which the main character always does. And Tuesday Mooney is definitely an adult, a woman in her 30s who works as a researcher of wealthy donors for a fundraising department of a major Boston hospital, which in the book is called BGH and is obviously a stand-in for MGH, where the author Kate Rakulia herself did the very same job a few years ago. So this book is a love letter to Boston and to the life that she had here. And being a professional researcher segues easily, of course, into being a good detective. And so in the book, when this wealthy donor called Vincent Price, Price with a Y, dies in the middle of a fundraiser, actually, and announces posthumously to all of Boston that in honor of his passing, there's going to be this giant scavenger hunt for clues around Boston, culminating in a costume party funeral on Boston Common, and a share of his fortune as a prize. Tuesday Mooney and a bunch of her friends and associates cannot risk taking up the hunt. So that's the kind of the plot, but it's not just a book about a scavenger hunt. It is also, as I said, a book of characters, Tuesday included, and all of whom are searching for themselves in some way. Most of them are dealing with some kind of loss or grief. Tuesday has buried a great loss from her teenage years, which she is forced to come to terms with again as this scavenger hunt progresses. Her closest friend, Dex, has buried his true theatrical self under a designer suit to go and work in a soulless bank every day. So he's definitely looking for his real, how to become his true self. Dory, Tuesday's next door neighbor, is a teenager dealing with grief over the loss of her mother. And Lyle, the much younger widow of Vincent Price, is left to move through her grief while also being in charge of this massive citywide scavenger hunt. So there were all these people dealing with things, which gives this book a little bit more weight than your average scavenger hunt book. But I don't want you to think for all of that loss and grief that it's a somber or a dark book. Rakulia has this really wicked sense of humor and this love of Boston and her general sort of sense of fun, and that all shines through and balances out any of the heavier themes that exist in the book. Plus, there's all that intricate plotting to follow. Not just the scavenger hunt mystery, but there's also a second mystery involving Tuesday's love interest, which I didn't even mention, did I? This book also has a lot of strong elements of romance. So if you're a romance lover, every single one of the main characters has a love interest, and Rakulia uses those relationships to explore the many faces of romantic love. She also explores like the faces of familial love and platonic love and all that kind of, that's definitely another big theme in the book. And as she's looking at romantic love, she does actually turn a lot of the romantic tropes kind of upside down. but without giving too much away, I will say that the lovers of romance, you will not be disappointed in the end. That's all I'm going to say. So this really is a book with a little something for lots of different readers. And with all that going on, it does kind of get a little bit messy at times. Rakulia has a slightly rambling, digressive style that sometimes made me feel like the book was going a little long, but it picks back up. It keeps picking itself back up. Overall, it keeps you turning the pages. And whether you're reading for the mysteries or the character or the next Boston scene, Tuesday Mooney Talks to Ghosts definitely has the charm to get you all the way through to the final page. So a great escape for, especially for this time of year, I feel. So
it sounds like it has a little bit of the Da Vinci Code puzzle, like,
oh yeah,
figuring out an intricate puzzle that you have to follow through.
It's absolutely one of those books for people who like that stuff. You know, the Weston game, I mean, she doesn't mention the Weston game so much when you look at interviews with her and stuff, but the Weston game, you know, if you read that as a kid, that's totally, you know, it's all these different characters.
I love that book.
Right. So it's for people who like those kinds of mysteries when there's lots of people involved and tons of intricacies. So let's go. There's some, as I said, elements of Gothic, and we're going to segue from that into Bridget, who's got real Gothic in the title even.
Yes. So I am going to talk about the book Mexican Gothic by Silvio Moreno Garcia. It came out earlier this year. It was a 2020 release. And it is indeed quite Gothic. That is, obviously, it's right there in the title. So it is set in 1950s Mexico. And the main character is a socialite named Naomi Taboada, I believe is how you say it, but I might be pronouncing it wrong. And she lives in Mexico City. Her family is quite wealthy. She has kind of a party girl lifestyle. That's what she does. And at the beginning of the book, she is summoned home from a party by her father, who has received a disturbing letter from her recently married cousin. And he has enlisted Naomi to investigate what is wrong with her cousin, who has just married and moved to kind of a crumbling house in the countryside of Mexico called High Place. Her groom, and in fact his entire family, are from England. They've moved to Mexico from England. They own a silver mine. The mine at present isn't producing any silver, but it did in the past. So she's married into this family that obviously was quite wealthy, is now sort of not. They pretty much only have this crumbling house and the land around it. They're very isolated from the community. They don't mix with anyone. They don't, they don't have servants from the village even. They have 3 servants who have come from England with them. They've lived there an amount of time that is sort of amorphous. We don't really know how long that is. And it's also not like you would think, oh, is this a very large family? No, it's a very small family. There is the old dying patriarch. They're called the Doyles, I should say, the Doyle family. There is the old dying patriarch, his son, who is the husband of Naomi's cousin Catalina, his aunt, and her son, Francis, who all sort of live in this house. And obviously Naomi knows something is wrong. It's immediately something is wrong when you go there. And so the book is her sort of investigating what is it? What's wrong here? And she can tell. So it's a mystery. It is, in the grand scheme of Gothic things, it is a ghost story. It is a horror story. There are some very disturbing images in here that will sort of haunt you. And it is sort of, but it's very rich in that it's deeper about what is it to be haunted? How, what haunts places, and how people can be haunted themselves and what like the ties and binds of family. I thought it was a very good book. It's a very atmospheric book. That's really what I would say, which is kind of the main pull of Gothic literature. Is it, and it nails that atmosphere, which is it's very the mysterious empty house that is like crumbling and destroyed, and as she's exploring it and how it disturbs her, like since we're seeing it from a purely outsider perspective, how this place disturbs her and the people in it and how they've been warped and shaped by this place. I thought it was extremely well written. It's very like detailed in these descriptions, and like you can really feel sort of the atmosphere of High Place while you're reading it. You'd really feel like transported to this like lonely mountaintop where only these people exist, and it's
do you get the Mexico kind of feel to it? I feel like when we think of these kinds of books, it's often like it's England and it's raining and and foggy, and translating that to a place that we would think of as warm and like beautiful. Like I wonder how she does that.
So that's I would say that's what's interesting is like I think it's important to like, since the Doyle family is from England and they have attempted to sort of live as if they are in England still, and in a way they've kind of shaped High Place's atmosphere to also feel more English. And there's sort of a thread through the book of like eugenics, which is an interest of the patriarch of this family, of the Doyles. Yeah, and like how sort of like the new world and the old world like mix, and what does that mean, and what's stronger and more.
Wow.
So it's kind of an interesting thread that she uses to explore like the attitudes of the people there, and also Naomi herself, who wants to become an anthropologist. So it's an interest of hers, and she obviously is like sort of disgusted by like the eugenicists, the eugenics angle. She's like, wow, okay, that's who this person is. Not a fan. And I think that it does a pretty good job of, and I would say I think you get some of sort of a Mexican like atmosphere, absolutely. But I do think she's deliberately like also trying to indicate the places where it is like England. Like it's not like there's still rain and there's still fog, and that those things can still happen. So it's sort of it straddles both.
It's interesting when you were talking about people being haunted, that I didn't realize. I mean, there are actually more parallels between Tuesday Mooney and Mexican Gothic, because Tuesday Mooney is absolutely, part of it is actually dealing with her being haunted by her past and a voice from her past who lives in her head. And so it's interesting to hear you say that. So
I don't want to, it's there's twists and turns as you sort of discover what's happening, as most Gothic things do, which is you sort of start with, here is the lay of it, and as you get drawn in further and further into it, you find the secret hidden like center of the story, which is as you get to it. But I thought it was, and I also thought it has a very satisfying ending and conclusion. So it really pulls you right through, and the conclusion is it's very satisfying. I think readers will find that if that's something that you're sometimes worried, where you're like, oh, well, it's great atmosphere and the characters are interesting, but what happens at the end? It's a very well resolved ending, I will say.
sounds good. I just bought that for someone for under the Christmas tree. So,
well, I hope they liked it.
I've been in the mood for something like that, and so I'll definitely have to put that on my list.
Yeah. It's also a great like read quickly book, because as I said, it really draws you through. So I read it in basically a day. So
wow. Great. Jeff, do you have some
Um,
Gothic? No.
no, actually, so mine is totally different. Um, I read, I'm going to talk about Shuggie Bain, which is this year's winner of the Man Booker Prize. And you guys know I always like to read the Booker winners. I went through, I've read all but one of the shortlisted finalists, and they were really very different this year. There were some African writers, some American writers, really, really good. And the winner was Shuggie Bain, who, which was written by Douglas Stewart. And there's an interesting story about it because it's an amazing novel, but it's also a first novel, which is even more amazing. So to win the Booker Prize for essentially your first full-length novel. And what's even funnier is that he shopped this book around to a variety of publishers and was rejected 30 times before it was eventually picked up by somebody. And then it goes on to win the Booker. So who would have thought? And another interesting just tidbit about it is that the author is Scottish. He lives in America now, but he's originally Scottish. And in all the years, I think it's over 50 years that they've been giving out this award. It's only the second time that a Scottish writer has won. So that's important in that the book takes place in Glasgow. Shuggie Bain is the name of the main character. He's a kid. And for most of the story, which takes place in the 1980s, he's about, from anywhere from like 10 to 12 years old, like 10 to 13 in that age. And then there's a brief part of the book where another 10 years later, when he's in his early mid-20s, he's looking back on the previous events. But most of the story takes place in that late 80s time period when he's growing up. And Shuggie is a nickname for Hugh. That's his real name. And his father is also named Hugh. He's known as Shug, just plain Shug. There's very little plot that I could give away in this story because a lot happens, but not a lot happens. This is a character study, and it's really focused, although there are a lot of characters, it's really about the relationship between Shuggie and his mother, Agnes. And she is one of the best characters and the most difficult characters to watch that I've read about in a long time. This is a very bleak book in a lot of ways, although in the end, I think you can't help but feel good at the end. It's all about this incredible love between Shuggie and his mother that overcomes in just the most appalling circumstances. This is a book about poverty. It's definitely a book about alcoholism. That's really the key driver of the story, is that his mother, who has been, Shuggie actually has two siblings. Both of them are half siblings from other parents, other fathers, who have disappeared in the meantime. There's domestic violence. There's horrible, just like incredible bleak poverty, mostly urban poverty because it takes place in Glasgow. There's a lot of dismal apartment buildings where people are just like barely scraping by. And it's kind of, one of the read-alikes that I thought about for it is Angela's Ashes, that came out, many years ago now. And this is, of course, fictional, but it has a lot of that same feel. And although it takes place in Scotland instead of Ireland, there's so much ethnicity involved in this. The story, I think, could take place anywhere, but you would lose, there's a lot of the Glaswegian dialect in this, which doesn't make it hard to read. You don't have to really understand it, but it gives such a flavor of what it must be like to be very ethnic in a very poor neighborhood in a place that has that kind of identity, and to imagine what people went through. So this, like I said, there's not a lot of plot that I can tell you about. It's just the following the relationships as Shuggie grows up and deals with the pain of watching his mother try to live life and just fail constantly. She's a very beautiful woman, and she knows that, and she tries to hold on to the beauty and the glamour. She's compared to Elizabeth Taylor. You know, she's very conscious of her beauty and trying to have nice clothes and live a life that's better than what her life really is. And she just can't do it. And the alcohol just keeps bringing her down and bringing her down. And people abandon her. Her kids abandon her. Shuggy never, never, never abandons her. And even though he's horrified, he can't cope. He's too young to know what to do in all these situations. Throw in the fact that he has plenty of his own problems because he's very effeminate. It's kind of, it's more than hinted at. He's probably gay. He could even be trans. And you kind of, in many places in the book, you feel like that's going to develop into a much more important part of the story, and yet it never does. So it's clear that that's part of what he's dealing with. But it's really mostly the relationship with him and his mother, and him trying to rescue her as a parent. And it's heartbreaking, but it's so beautifully written. And in all the pain, there's a tremendous amount of hope. And just all the family relationships, it's incredibly powerful. I loved it. And the things like, if you like this kind of story, if you've read Roddy Doyle, people like that. The other person that it reminded me of, I don't know if any of you read, what was his name? John Boyne,
Yeah.
who wrote a massive book called The Heart's Invisible Furies, which was another kind of, I found them very similar. And if you like that kind of epic ethnic story, Wakefield has so many people with Irish background that I know a lot of our readers tend to enjoy that stuff. And even though this is Scottish, it has the same flavor. So I think you'd still, if that kind of thing appeals to you, you'd really enjoy it. It's a beautifully written book.
I got shades of Streetcar Named Desire in there somewhere too. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
with the alcohol.
his mother, yeah, you could definitely. She's a Stella, absolutely.
Right.
Definitely. Yeah, it was also, I think I forgot to mention, it was also nominated it was a finalist for the National Book Award as well. So it's been getting a lot of buzz, and I think it's definitely worth it.
Great. Now, following the threads of Gothic and darkness and days of the week. Go for it, Jackie. Tell them what the title is.
Oh, Jackie's
Yeah,
frozen.
is it the week?
Oh, she's okay now.
You're back.
Oh, did I freeze? Sorry.
You froze briefly, but you're fine now.
Okay. Okay. So I read The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman, who is, I have not heard of him. His name sounded familiar, but he's actually, I guess, a TV personality in England. And I shared it with Megan in our circulation department, and she felt the same way. We both did not want it to end. This was his first novel, and I just discovered on Goodreads right before we recorded this that it appears that it's going to be a series. It said it was listed as #1, so it looks like it might be out next. So it's a mystery, and I would say it is closest in tone and style to maybe Anthony Horowitz's like all of his The Word is Murder, his latest one, which I think we determined as Moonflower Murders. It's in that same kind of cheeky. Great character, totally made this book. So what it's about is a group of 4 retirees in a kind of swanky retirement in Kent, in the English, and they have a little murder club where they had been going over cold cases. A previous member of the club who has to the hospice effect, the former police officer. So she would like smuggle in these cold cases from when she used to, from when she was working. And so once she stopped, they brought in this other member, and as they're just getting this club started, an actual murder falls into. So the whole book is just them trying to solve this crime, and the characters are just amazing. It is Joyce, who is a retired nurse, and she's the only one whose first person perspective you get, because she starts keeping a diary, and so the third person narration is occasionally told from other people's perspectives, but hers is the only first person point of view you get. And she's very kind of like someone with tea cozies, and she's delightful, and Joyce Meadowcroft is her name. And then there's Elizabeth, who has this kind of past that you're not quite clear on, but she's very well connected and very take charge, very sharp. Ibrahim is a retired psychiatrist. He's very bright. He's very detail oriented. He's their kind of like academic in the mix. And then there's Ron, who was a union organizer. He was called Red Ron when he was younger. And for like making kicks up a bit at like meetings that about, but they're the Thursday Murder Club because they meet in the Jigsaw room on Thursdays, because that's when it's available. Because when it's and just crossword club for the French conversation group. This is
sounding a lot like library meeting rooms.
Yeah. Yes. It's so delightful, and it's a pretty clever. So you're okay with it just being about the characters, but the mystery was pretty clever. There were a lot, like tons of red herrings. Like every chapter, you'd be like, "Oh my god, it was this guy," and then you're like, "Oh no, it wasn't. No, it wasn't." But even the peripheral characters, kind of the secondary characters, are really well done. There's a young cop who had been transferred from London to this relationship, which subsequently fell apart, and now she's sort of stuck there. And she really wants to, get into it and be on the homicide squad. So she ends up involved, and her boss is like 50-something experienced homicide detective, and he's kind of looking for love, and it's just very adorable. But they get to the bottom of it, and I'm glad to hear it's going to be a series, because the characters are just so worth revisiting.
You know who's doing the series?
It was well done, and I highly recommend it. What's that?
You know who is doing the series? Is that?
No, I think she means a series of books, not a series.
Sorry.
Oh, not a TV series.
Although it sounds
no, sorry. I think it's going to be
I'm picturing various actors in my head doing this. Yeah.
I know it would actually probably be fantastic.
This is definitely becoming a popular book. I can see,
but I really strongly recommend it. Sorry, Karen.
I was just saying it's definitely becoming a popular book. I've been noticing it on the holds list. The holds are growing and growing, and I've had to order more copies. So we'll keep an eye on it. Make sure you have enough copies for everybody.
I mean, even I, an avowed non-mystery reader, am intrigued, because I love interesting characters, and it sounds fun. So
yeah,
it will make you want to retire. I just wanted to go move to a village.
But isn't everything making you want to retire?
Yeah.
Solve mysteries. I mean, yes, everything makes me want to retire. 25
That's sort of the
years.
way this year is going, right?
Yeah. Yes. And so we apologize for the slight technical difficulties that we had in the last Jackie segment, but I think
it's me, I guess.
No, yeah, it's okay. I think we probably got the point across. And I think we all want to read the book now. So,
Yeah.
that's it. We're done. That is it until next month for Book Buzz. I just want to let you all know that we have a big new season of programming coming up, and we will be doing, for those of you who are interested, our Commit to Your Community series continues, and our second chapter is just left my brain. What's it called, Jackie? It's called, she's frozen
With
again.
compassion.
Yes, Act with Compassion, right. And so
Act with compassion.
thank you. Act with Compassion is the first event in that series is actually a book group. Actually, it's not the first event in the series. Ryan Dowd is the first event in the series. And that is on January. Who's going to remember before I do?
I'm going to look at the calendar.
10th, I believe.
13th.
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 Jackie, sorry, all your answers are coming out a little late.
Wednesday evening, the 13th.
There we go. So we have Ryan Dowd coming, and he is an amazing speaker, and who's going to talk. He works in a homeless shelter in Chicago, and he's going to be talking to us about homelessness. And I highly encourage everyone to attend that one. And then after that, we will be reading our first book group of this session is the book Evicted. And that discussion is on the 27th of January. So you still have time to get that book and read it. I know Jeff and Jackie and all of you have read it, or at least read parts of it. And
Parts of it. I'm halfway.
Not me.
I have read part of it as well.
Yeah.
And there are lots of copies in the system, but if anyone has requested books, you know that it's taking a little bit longer to get them from other places. So
yeah, so make sure you
plan ahead.
Put yours on order now. It's a very well written read. So it looks like a slightly bigger book, but it's actually one of those narrative nonfiction books that just takes you right through. So it actually follows the lives of real people and their real stories. So
it'll be interesting, actually, sorry to interrupt you, because Ryan Dowd is from Chicago, and Evicted all takes place in Milwaukee, which is, just up the coast,
up the coast.
A little bit. It's bigger out there, but
it's bigger out there.
I'm kind of curious to see if he has any insights into a place that's not relatively nearby his neck of the woods.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, go to our calendar at wakefieldlibrary.org for all of our events, and you can sign up for any of them there. And we hope to see you not only here in this space, but in all those other ones too, next in January. All right. Take care. Thanks a lot for coming, and happy 2021 by the next time we see you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.